Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Monday, January 25th, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or in the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered in my over 46 years of doing therapy. And these tools are available absolutely free at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the red and white bullseye or the link in the upper left-hand corner of most pages that says Start Here, it'll take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. The book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of that book is a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I can use to manage my emotions, especially my negative emotions, to discover what it is my negative emotions are most useful for within my mind-body energy system, and to dismantle the energies that don't belong in my system, those energies of trauma, those energies of that feed and fuel the distortions that help me create my negative emotions. And when I do that, one situation at a time, one worksheet process at a time, one breath session at a time, my life gets better. My life gets better, sometimes in leaps and bounds. And we encourage people to go there, download that chapter of that book, read it, and then you can actually download the actual worksheet itself, absolutely free. And download the worksheet, print it off and use it as often as you'd like. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that process, and those audio files can serve as a tutorial for you. And you can also go to your app store and type in the 3 words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness and get access to a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that process, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we encourage people to do that soon and often, and then give us a call if you have comments or questions. The call-in number here is 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, it'll put a little question mark by your phone number, and I'll see that and announce you by your area code. We are in the 25th day of this year, and we have decided to do the Course in Miracles lessons to talk about them and the corresponding material in Pam Grout's book. So today is lesson 25. Today's lesson simply states, I do not know what anything is for. The commentary with that lesson is, purpose is meaning. Today's idea explains why nothing you see means anything. You do not know what it is for. Therefore, it is meaningless to you. Everything is for your own best interests. That is what it is for. That is its purpose. That is what it means. It is in recognizing this that your goals become unified. It is in recognizing this that what you see is given meaning. You perceive the world and everything in it as meaningful in terms of ego goals. These goals of the ego have nothing to do with your own best interests, because the ego is not you. This false identification makes you incapable of understanding what anything is for. As a result, you're bound to misuse it. When you believe this, you will try to withdraw the goals you have assigned to the world instead of attempting to reinforce them. Another way of describing the goals you now perceive is to say that they are all connected with personal interests. Since you have no personal interests, your goals are really concerned with nothing. In cherishing them, therefore, you have no goals at all. And thus, you do not know what anything is for. So, that's a little bit, I'm going to back up and read that again because that's a little bit bendy in there with the meaning and the words. Another way of describing the goals you now perceive is to say that they are all concerned with, quote, personal, close quotes, interests. Since you have no personal interests, since you don't know what is in your best interest, your goals are really concerned with nothing. So in cherishing your goals, therefore you have no goals at all. And thus you do not know what anything is for. So if you're coming at this from the ego space, you don't know anything. Before you can make any sense out of the exercises for today, one more thought is necessary. At the most superficial levels, you do not recognize purpose. Yet, purpose cannot be understood at these levels. For example, you do not understand that a telephone is for the purpose of talking to someone who is not physically. For instance, you do understand that a telephone is for the purpose of talking to someone who is not physically in your immediate vicinity. What you do not understand is what you want to reach him for. And it is this that makes your contact with him meaningful or not. It is crucial to your learning to be willing to give up the goals you have established for everything. The recognition that they are meaningless rather than good or bad is the only way to accomplish this. The idea for today is a step in this direction. So, there's a huge difference between saying the goal is meaningless versus the goal is good or bad. They're offering a suggestion for 6 practice periods, each of 2 minutes duration. Each practice period should begin with a slow repetition of the idea for today, followed by looking about you, letting your glance rest on whatever happens to catch your eye, near or far, important or unimportant, human or non-human. With your eyes resting on each subject you select, you say, for example, I do not know what this chair is for. I do not know what this pencil is for. I do not know what this hand is for. Say this quite slowly without shifting your eyes from the subject until you have completed the statement about it, and then move on to the next subject and apply today's idea as before. I do not know what anything is for. And as we've talked about, we're also looking at Pam Grout's book, A Course in Miracles Experiment. And today's chapter 25 is titled The Home Depot of Spiritual Practices. In this chapter, she quotes A Course in Miracles where it says, do not bend reality to your tiny experience or limit its purpose to your little personal thoughts. Pam writes, the universe is kind of like Home Depot, offering an unlimited selection of tools to further my good. Lesson 25 states, I do not know what anything is for. And this assures me that every single person, every single thing that happens is in my best interest. But instead of repeating that wordy mantra, I prefer to channel Hans Schultz. He's the fictional sergeant to Colonel Wilhelm Klink in the old TV series Hogan's Heroes. Even though Schultz knew about the shenanigans of the Allied prisoners of war who were running special operations from Stalag 13, he was famous for proclaiming to his inept colonel, "I know nothing," in a clipped German accent. I repeat that line, complete with the accent, quite often. In fact, it has become an important line item in my spiritual practice. I've learned that any time I think I've figured something out, any time I believe I've found the route to this intention or that dream, I promptly proceed to get in my own way. My understanding is sorely limited. But when, quote, I know nothing, like Hans Schultz, I leave the gates wide open for blessings to rush in. 6 times today, I will remember Hans Schultz and thank him for providing that inspiration, and important spiritual practices can come from anywhere. So, I do not know what anything is for. Yet, being raised in the Western culture, I have been trained to try to formulate ideas about what everything is for, and to understand this or that. The point of this lesson is, every time I have done that, whether I call it good or bad, I'm in error, because I'm only looking at it from a very limited, very surface level, and at that surface level, I cannot know what anything is or is for. Because the truth of the world, of the universe, of the Tao, of the creation, of the flow of life, is far more broad, expansive, inclusive than anything my conscious logical mind can even begin to comprehend, much less orchestrate. So, it's a darn good thing that the world doesn't unfold the way I want it to. Just like, it's a darn good thing that when I was raising my children, I, as the adult, got to decide what the house rules were and what they would be fed on a regular basis, because if it were left up to them, it would not have been a healthy upbringing. They would have gotten into far more potentially even life-threatening dangers than the few that they did, because they didn't have the intellect, the life experience, they didn't have the maturity to understand the complexities of life that I, as an adult, having lived, decades more in the physical realm, was able to share with them and protect them from. Well, the same is true at deeper and deeper levels every time I look at my life. And that's what this lesson is trying to help us understand. There is nothing about my level of understanding at the conscious logical mind that is productive. It's meaningless in the big picture. Essentially, every time I think I've got something figured out, it's a tiny little piece of nothingness, and I've got dominion over it. And if I cherish it over the flow of life, then I create more and more upset for myself. So, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. How can we support you? What's a comment or question about today's lesson? What is it that you know or don't know that we might share in ignorance together? Embrace your ignorance. It's like the old koan that says, no ignorance, no end to ignorance. Again, a koan is just a statement of something that's deeply true and paradoxically false at the same time, seemingly false at the same time. I'm just called to mention, since nobody has a hand up, that I had suggested the book Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging by Sebastian Junger, or Junger, Junger. On Homecoming and Belonging, Tribe. And in reading some of that book this weekend, I was really struck by the power of the recognition of some of the patterns, some of what happened and happens on a regular basis when more, quote, sophisticated cultures come into contact with less sophisticated cultures, or they are living near each other. For instance, the phenomenon of the Europeans who came to this continent and lived anywhere near the native people, the indigenous people. And history records, the true history, the accurate history, records how many, many Europeans routinely would give up life in the settlements to go live as or with the Indians. And essentially never did Indians choose for the, quote, civilized life over the natural life they had in their tribe or with their families or with their connection to nature. And so everything about the deep spiritual teachings, like Guy Finley says, there's nothing more practical than true spirituality. And the ones that really take me, that are not religious, that aren't manipulated by people for power and gain, but are just deep truths about us as human beings, point to this connection to nature, all of nature, deep connection and commitment to the people around us, the living representation of doing only to others what you would like to have done to and for you. So I recommend the book Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging. It's a relatively short book. It's only 171 pages and not very loaded with research and technology. It's fairly easy read. And I would, recommend that you mention that book to any veterans you have or families of veterans if you have, because that's where I was pointed toward the book from the people I interviewed who work with helping veterans. Area code 484. You're in the air.
Hi, Dr. Tim. This is Ellen.
Hello, Ellen. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Great.
What's on your mind?
I just wanted to share the experience I had with today's lesson, and then I also have a question for you. But the first time I practiced this lesson this morning, for the very first thing I looked at, which was a doorknob, and I said, I don't know what this doorknob is for, I immediately heard, it's for you. And I was like, okay. And so I went to the next thing, it's for you. The next thing, it's for you. And it just that just kept happening, everything that I looked at and made that statement. And so while I wasn't getting any particular meaning, I found myself feeling supported somehow, like supported and no longer alone. It was like all these things were for me. And just like it says in the lesson that everything is in your best interest, it's for your best interest. So it just gave me a whole new appreciation for all of these things that I see around me on a day-to-day basis, which normally I don't even pay any attention to, like a chair. You know, I take all the chairs and every piece of furniture in my house, I kind of take it for granted. I don't even notice them. But this morning, as I was getting that message, you know, that this is, everything is for me, I began to develop this much deeper appreciation for everything. And it just made me feel really good. It made me feel connected to everything.
Great. That's essentially what this lesson is pointing us towards, that we will never understand at that conscious logical level. This is why when people say, you know, I got to figure this out, or I want to find the lesson in this. Well, the lessons are endless. And when I identify, oh, I know what this was about, I know why this happened now, that's just one potential possibility for why that's a part of my life unfolding. I'll never know exactly why this or that happened or what life is about in a way that I could specify it with words and communicate it verbally or in a written form to someone else. And that has to be okay, because life, by definition, is this ongoing flowing process that's far more inclusive and expansive than language can even begin to pin down. But you know, the vast majority of my perceptual ability is tied to the language I was taught when I was being taught language. And this whole set of exercises is trying to help me develop an entirely different way of perceiving that's beyond language.
Yeah, and also how we have been taught to give certain things more importance than other things. And so, you know, for probably, you know, most of my life, I've appreciated things like trees and flowers and the sky. But I wasn't appreciating all of the other things. And that's what today's lesson really got me to see. Wow. It's all equal. It's important. Everything, yes, everything. And even the thing, like I looked at something I didn't like the looks of, and it was like, even that is for me, because it's bringing something into my awareness that I've hidden from myself. And so everything is for me. And that was the other experience. I have a question about this, and I was driving right before I called in. I was driving home from the grocery store, and I was coming to this intersection with a four-way stop, and I was going to be making a left, and I could see someone approaching from the opposite direction who didn't have his turn signal on, so I assumed he was going to be going straight. And I was clearly going to reach the intersection first, but I could just feel like this person was trying to race to the intersection to get there first so that he could just go and wouldn't have to wait for me to make my turn. So, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. I mean, I got to the intersection first, and I started to pull into it, but just as he pulled into it, he didn't even really stop. He just slowed down, and then he just kept going. And right away, you know, there's that anger of like, how dare he not give me my turn? And then I caught myself, and I remembered the lesson, and I said, oh, well, I don't know what anything is for, and it's for me. And so I was like, okay, yes, that's right. Everything is for me. And I very quickly was able to see, I mean, this is a foundational belief that I discovered, I don't know, over 10 years ago. You know, this belief that I don't matter, you know, so people just totally disregard me, right? Which is exactly what seemed to happen at that intersection. So, you know, then I had a little chuckle over it. Yep, I see. That is, but the thing is, this is my question. You know, I don't believe that anymore. That was a very core belief, and I know, you know, I was shown when I took it on as a baby, and it just been, you know, it was reinforced because it kept, you know, I kept creating the experience of it over and over and over again in my life. But once I, you know, I really started on this path and discovered, wow, look at that. It's like, wow, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. And I've done, you know, the work around that. And so, but yet, it still keeps popping up. So my question is, because what kind of came to me when I was wondering about that was, oh, it must be continuing to come up because while I no longer believe that about myself, I must still have repressed feelings that I haven't allowed to come to the surface. And so that's exactly like what
so take a breath. This is just so beautiful. So the fact of the matter is that this event happened, that you got to a stop sign and somebody else was coming to that stop sign and they wanted to go through it. And they didn't want to have to wait for you. So they were racing to the stop sign.
Mm-hmm.
I have to point out to you that that has nothing to do with somebody else not giving you validity or wanting to acknowledge your existence.
Oh, and I get that. I get that. That's my.
It's a traffic situation. Exactly. And so
it's
here's
from me.
All right, but look at this. Look at this. There's a world. There's an infinite expanse of possibilities to look at here. What else is the lesson here? What's the lesson is Ellen is choosing to do somebody typed in the chat room, maybe they had to poo real badly, really bad. Anyway, the other part of the lesson here is Ellen has decided to do Course in Miracles lessons and really work on them. Maybe for the first time, maybe for the 17th time. And so Ellen is more awake in her daily experience. And Ellen got an intuitive hit. This person, to race there and wants to go. So Ellen was so awake, so connected to the experience that Ellen didn't even come close to a car accident. There's another lesson. How about that?
I
How
do
about just
recognize
focusing
that.
on that? Yeah, and then just having this passing thought that, I could also interpret this event that, by the way, I don't know what it is for, as the lesson for today specifies. I could also interpret it as a little bit of a reminder about this old issue I had, which really used to trigger me deeply when I would bump into it, and now it's not triggering me as much. I could also say, wow, isn't it wonderful how the more I do the Course in Miracles work, the more awake and aware I am in daily life, and the more safe my life becomes. So just notice the level of interpretation that our Western conscious logical mind, with all of its language, wants to put on things to give it meaning. And that's what this Course in Miracles lesson says. None of the meanings that I give life mean anything. They're all meaningless. Even the meaning that, this is here to teach me that I still have some of that old issue. That's meaningless. Because the meaning, the purpose of life, goes far beyond anything that our language can encapsulate or communicate. So if I want to take a little personal meaning from that, I can. And if I do one of those, I place a personal meaning on these neutral life events, and I end up with a negative emotional state, I probably would benefit by doing some worksheets, some EFT tapping or breathing, a breath session, because the negative emotional state is there to alert me to the fact that I don't know what this is for. I'm not functioning at the level that would allow me to see what the truth of this lesson is, that everything is happening for me. And there's that other critical part of this lesson, for my mind, which is that my false identification makes me incapable of understanding what anything is for. That doesn't mean that as soon as I change what I think my identification is, I'm going to know what everything is for. It means to me, when I read this lesson, every time I place a meaning on something, it's meaningless. Every time I step back and understand I will never understand the flow and working of the universe, and I can rest in the realization that it's happening for me, I can breathe, release, and let it go, and then I move on, and life seems better to me because I'm starting to get into the flow, into the Tao, into allowance and surrender, and as the identifying the energy of desire, as the way of mastery would call us to. So I think you're right on.
Yeah, and so, one of the things, and I don't limit, like you said, one of the things was, hey, I was awake enough not to get into the accident, and because I was aware I could tell what he was going to do. And I believe that there's probably an unlimited number of benefits in every experience. So I wouldn't limit it to any certain number of things, but another thing that, like when I saw that, this is that old thing, right, where people just ignore me or whatever, I saw it as, because the anger did flare up. And so it was like, so this was an opportunity for me to feel and even express that anger, because I was alone in my car, so I could just, I blurted something out that felt really good. But so I just saw it as like, wow, that was an opportunity for me to, allow some of that feeling that appears that it still may be, within me, to feel a little bit of it. So I saw that as a great benefit. And
well, and in this work, we would say that it's really an opportunity to do some personal work to dismantle the energy I'm still carrying about that false belief and that false meaning, because it is meaningless unless I give it value. So if I were to go home after an incident like that and do a few worksheets, I might be able to unload some of that baggage, false belief, traumatic energy from past times where that false belief got resonated.
Well, wasn't that an opportunity to do that right there?
Wasn't it an opportunity to do what?
To release some of that emotional baggage. That's how I saw it. It was an opportunity.
Not if I just feel it and express it. Feeling it and expressing it is good in terms of being able to identify it. In this work, what we understand is it's, one of the bottom line observations I give to people says, anytime I have a negative thought about myself or somebody else or a negative emotion, I can instantly know three things. The first thing is, this is based in a lie. This is based on a falsehood. This is not true. The second thing I can know is, this is an old tape playing. I am never upset for the reason I think I am. This is a Course in Miracles lesson. I'm never upset about what's going on in the present moment. If I have an upset, it's about the past. It's about something I've downloaded from the past. It's about a belief, a crystallized belief that I have been holding on to that's just gotten resonated. So if I understand that and I realize I got triggered because of an event that happened at an intersection and the interpretation I put on that event, that's an opportunity for me to go do some worksheets, some breath sessions, some EFT tapping, some Ho'oponopono, some Byron Katie work, to dismantle what is the false belief that I carried with me into that situation that I'm either using to generate anger and upset in that moment, or that's resonating an old traumatic anger and painful energy that I carried with me into that moment.
So
it's never about what's going on in the moment.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and that was very clear to me. But so are you saying that because I did get triggered, that I must still believe that old belief that I'm not conscious? I mean, I really don't believe it anymore. I really don't. So that's why I thought, maybe.
So here's the idea. You can argue with your conscious logical mind about that endlessly, and it says in this lesson that my ego mind and all of its thoughts can have their beliefs. But if I think this is not about something in the past, if I think, I've already gotten rid of that belief, and I get angry when that belief comes up, I'm kidding myself. And that's the value of the worksheet process, where I cancel everything I think I want, cancel what my conscious logical mind is telling me, and ask to be shown something that my conscious logical mind cannot show me. Because if I got triggered to anger, it means I'm carrying that, what Michael Rice would call disintegrative energy within me, and or I'm using my thought process in that moment to create that negative emotion. And I'm not aware of how, if in the next breath I'm saying, isn't it good that I've gotten rid of that I don't truly believe that anymore. So the whole purpose of the Mind Shifter tool, the whole purpose of the Reality Management Worksheet is to bypass what my conscious logical mind will continually tell me about how it knows that it's right and it's perceiving things accurately. But I can understand that if I have any negative emotional state, I'm not perceiving accurately. And then I can step into the use of a tool to dismantle the energies or false beliefs that I carried with me into that present moment situation.
So I think what you're saying is that while my conscious mind believes that is not something, that old pattern of, I don't matter, is not something that I believe anymore. However, if it's still triggering me, that means that in my unconscious mind, it's still being believed.
Yes. Yes, and basically, it's important here to understand what we mean by unconscious. Unconscious is simply my consciousness, things that I've lived through and come to believe that I'm not willing to look at. It's not some mystical, magical, otherworldly thing. It's just things I've lived through, things I've come to believe that I don't want to look at. That's what makes up the unconscious. Some part of my mind is hiding this from me. And the good news is we've been given this guidance system, which is our emotional experience, that lets us know when we're lying to ourselves, because we get upset. We get upset and we think it's about somebody else, or we get upset and we think, this isn't my stuff. We get upset and we think, well, I've already dealt with my issues regarding this, so this must be the other person's problem. So I must be justified in I must be justified in my anger. And that's what we one of the things we talk about quite often. When people want to be done with an issue, we say, that's a trap. My wanting to be done with an issue is a trap. Because as soon as I believe I'm done with an issue, then I'm going to have this tendency to think the next time I get triggered, since I've already done my work around that, this must not be my issue. This must be the other person's problem. And then I have the I have all the excuses for rationalizing how it's them and not me, and then not doing my work.
I knew it was me, for sure. I was just thinking that this is. I just thought maybe it was just, even though I have corrected my mind as far as no longer believing that, but isn't it possible that you can make that correction and yet still not have emptied out all the emotional baggage of repressing those feelings when you did believe it?
Well, that's basically what we're saying. I think we're using slightly different words to say the same thing. And then the question becomes, okay, so now what's most beneficial? If I'm at a conscious level, I don't believe this, but at an emotional level, I still have upset. And what's most beneficial for me to do? And what we're suggesting in this work is the reality management worksheet is the next most beneficial thing to do.
Okay.
Map out what I'm doing with my conscious logical mind, the triggering event, the thought I'm using to create the negative emotion itself, and what my mind is telling me needs to happen so that I don't get triggered again. Cancel all of that and do a brief meditation and ask to be shown the hidden part of my mind that's actually creating this, and then just trust that process. Trust that whatever comes into my mind when I do that is part of what I need to see to begin to heal here and move forward. And as I do that process again and again and again, an endless number of times, an infinite number of times, I get more and more liberated for the potential of living my life in that more grateful, joyful, appreciative space where I can understand what this lesson is trying to help me see, that basically everything is happening for me, not to me. But I can't understand how everything is happening for me rather than to me if I stay in the conscious logical and in the language-based perception, because it doesn't make sense. It's too complex to fit into that mode.
Okay, so let me just ask you one other question about this. So when I do the worksheet, does it matter whether I use, like, for example, the incident that happened today versus the incident that happened when I was a child that I know, where I believe this first, came up in this life?
Well, the recommendation that I make most often in this work, and I think it would be echoed by Dr. Rice, is that what's probably most beneficial for me is to use the incident that came up today. You know,
Okay.
Way of Mastery tells me that my everyday life that we now know is not ordinary from the Way of Mastery teachings. You never have what you would call an ordinary moment. Your life is this extension of the creative energy in form. It's a miracle of life expressing in, through, as, and around you in each moment. So there's nothing ordinary about your day. That day that you have as it unfolds for you is the most perfect ashram you could ever be in. It's the most perfect school. So if I take that as my guide, then I do my worksheets on whatever has come up in the moment. And one of the benefits to that is that I do not then get distracted by my ego belief system and my conscious logical mind that always wants to figure it out. And, you know, the worksheet process and some energy work techniques that I think duplicate that process that I've done, one of the most amazing things about them is that it almost never goes to where my conscious logical mind thinks it should. I had a very very rough relationship with my father's mother. And when I first learned this energy technique, I would do it and I would think, oh, I bet this is going to relate to that. Oh, this is going to relate to Grandma Hayes. Oh, this is going to relate to Grandma. It never went to Grandma Hayes. Shockingly, it was very productive every time I did it, but every time my mind would tell me, oh, it's going to go to it would go to something else, and I would just be baffled by how powerful and useful it was, and yet it never went to the Grandma Hayes stuff. Finally,
so
one day...
what is the technique?
Well, it's just like the worksheet. I mean, all you need to know is it's basically the worksheet lets you do that technique without having to have another person in the room. The worksheet basically does the same technique. I specify what my thoughts are, what the triggering event was, what my emotion is, what my mind is telling me needs to happen, or what this person should have done so that I wouldn't have to feel this upset. And then I just go into a brief meditation and ask to be shown, and what bubbles up is almost never what my conscious logical mind said it was going to be before I started the process. So that's why I tell people, I do it for myself, and I tell people, if I have an event happen in my life, and I think, oh, this is just like in grade school where the bullies did blah, 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 I do the worksheet on the event today. I might then go back and do some more worksheets on the event of the bullies in grade school that I just remembered, but I want to start where I am with the energies that have gotten stirred up and the thoughts that are awake in me, because it's quite likely to go to something that my conscious logical mind would never put together.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And it might go back to the thing I think, but it might also give me a slightly different aspect of that memory than I had ever encountered before. Whereas if I just do it from the conscious logical perspective, somebody just texted me a question. If I go at it from the conscious logical perspective, it might hide from me something that would be good for me to do. So, again, the answer to your question, the real short answer is, I would recommend that you start with the incident that happened today and leave yourself completely open to the fact that it may go back to the thing that popped into your mind, and it also might be related to something completely different.
Okay.
So, Susan, I'm going to have to turn on a microphone here. Hold on a minute, Ellen. So I don't quite understand the question. Can you clarify the question, Susan?
Okay. I love this discussion. Hello, Ellen.
Hello, Susan.
I love this discussion. It's been terrific. So you say you start a worksheet, you think, this is going to clarify something having to do with Grandma Hayes, but Grandma Hayes doesn't show up, and it goes somewhere else. You've pointed in the, you just haven't come up with an actual, like, give me an example of one place it went instead of Grandma Hayes.
It went everywhere else in the world. It would go to an interaction with my brother. It would go to an interaction with a teacher. It would go to something from, 5 years ago or 40 years ago. It would bounce all over the place like any other worksheet would. And finally, I'd say probably 6 or 8 years into that process, I had a situation where there was a family in my office, and they had a 10-year-old that was really in an abusive situation. And they left my office, and I was so triggered, and I did the worksheet, and it went to Grandma Hayes. And something about Grandma Hayes I never would have imagined, because it had to do with a helpless and hopeless situation for this 10-year-old that was in my office, and it went to my feelings of being helpless and hopeless when my grandmother left the house because she could no longer live with us and went to a nursing home and then died there. So all of that stuff where I would make the mental emotional connections to feeling like I'm not good enough, or someone's ridiculing me, or someone's being too hard on me, and all of that stuff that I downloaded in my interactions with my grandmother, whenever I would do worksheets on that and think, oh, this is going to go to Grandma, it never did. It always went to other stuff, other incidents, other interactions with other people or myself. And then the one time I never would have imagined that this would have gone to anything with my grandmother, it went to an aspect of my life with my grandmother that I never imagined would have come up on a worksheet. And it was all about the resonating energy of feeling helpless and hopeless, because I had felt helpless. I had felt this helpless, hopeless situation for this 10-year-old who was in my office. And I felt, so helpless and hopeless to be able to help my father with his grief about his mother, help my grandmother, change life, etc. And it was after she was already out of the house.
Wow.
So the point is, it almost never goes where my conscious logical mind thinks it's going to go. So I'm better off using whatever the triggering event was that my conscious logical mind serves up, and then cancel all of that, cancel every goal, everything I think it means, everything I think it's about, and ask to be shown. And the more I practice that canceling and asking, putting myself in that open, allowing space, the better the process unfolds.
Yeah, there's something really wonderful about how the worksheet is set up, that it it kind of like tricks your conscious mind. I mean, it leads it, you just don't, you can't go there the way it leads you through the worksheet. It leads you in this, it seems like it's another direction, but it's in the end it's leading you to what the truth is.
Yeah, it's essentially leading you to what today's lesson is about. It leads you to understand that whatever your mind is telling you, whenever you're in any upset, that's meaningless. The worksheet is deeply infused with the work of the Course in Miracles, and the way that it tells us that we don't understand things and that we need to cancel everything we think we want, our trifling treasures put away, and leave a clean and open space for the Christ mind to come. That's essentially what the worksheet does every time.
Mm.
And if I read every line on the worksheet every time I do it, then I take a little bit more of I undo a little bit more of the mind-bending conditioning that I was given when I was given language in this culture. And I read about how, every time I have a negative emotion, it means my mind is using corrupt data to create a picture. And the fear and hostility-based stories and realities are never true. Every time I read that, I'm undoing some of the conditioning of this culture that made me feel and believe that I know what's going on, and I need to rely on my intellect.
And that's
and
so
as
important.
David Bohm points out, David Bohm points out that's doing sustained incoherence, because it's my intellect that got me into this mess. Go ahead, Ellen. What is so important?
Well, to do that, to read every part on the worksheet, and because, my ego mind is telling me, oh, well, you've read that before, you know that, you don't have to go back and read it again. But I'm like, no, because I know I got to stay out of that mind and just follow the instructions on the worksheet and read everything that's on there.
Yeah, it's a deconditioning process, right? It's the undoing of the brainwashing that's needed.
Right. And so it's a perfect thing to do along with the Course in Miracles, because that's exactly what the lessons in the Course are doing.
I would have to agree, which is why we're doing it and why we're going to go through them on the show. So I appreciate both of you and your calls and questions, as always, and I realize we're down to our last minute and a half, so I will mute you and invite you to stick around for questions, as always, and I realize we're down to our last minute and a half, so I will mute you and invite you to stick around for the second hour. Jeannie Rice is here, and I will remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false.